Welcome to TAO Talk, the weekly blockmate show recapping all the news in the Bittensor ecosystem. I'm your host, 563, joined always by my co-host, Brody from Onchain Outpost. Today we have a special guest, Tuta from Mentat Minds. How's it going, guys?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. But let's just jump into it. It's been a pretty fun week. Let me bring up my screen here and start going through the news. Let's do this one over here. So this week, I think the biggest update is this update. Well, this update that we're looking forward to on mainnet. We're getting Ledger support. So I think people are really excited about Ledger hardware wallet support. For the first time, you're going to be able to custody your TAO in cold storage. You guys excited?
For sure. We've been waiting for that for maybe 2-3 weeks now.
Yeah, they keep pushing it back. I have a really bad habit of custodying a lot of money on hot wallets. So
right.
I probably actually should put my funds over to a cold wallet. I've got just a lot of money sitting in a browser extension.
It is usually recommended.
Yeah, it feels a little uncomfortable having it in a browser extension, but I don't think you can stake with the Ledger just yet. But maybe that could be down the line. I think I heard somebody say that it was just like you have to hold your TAO, which isn't perfect, but
for
the whales out there, it probably makes them feel better. I don't know. It'd probably make me feel better, to be fair. I have an uncomfortable amount of TAO, so probably put some on Ledger would make sense. But yeah, I think the one that's flying under the radar right now is this child hotkey. I know Tuta over at Mentat Minds, you guys are deep into that. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So we've been following this update mainly because of the child hotkey feature. Basically, it's going to really improve the way validation work on the network. So yeah, just to give a quick LE5, it's ELI5. It's basically allowing hotkeys to point to other child hotkeys that would do the validation on specific subnets on the behalf of the parent hotkey. And so basically what this allows is the biggest validator or biggest delegators to just focus on validating on the subnets there are they know, and delegating this validation to other validators, maybe more specialized in different subnets. So hopefully we might see weight copying going down because the weight copiers will just choose to set child hotkeys on the subnets they weight copy instead of validating. So yeah, that may be a big plus for the ecosystem. We don't know how it's gonna happen. So yeah, really looking forward to this update and see how the network takes advantage of it or not, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I always looked at it as a security update, right? So you have a validator that has this one key that they're using across all these subnets. And if that one key gets compromised, it's a bad deal. But now you have these sub keys basically that you could have split up. And that's just like a great security feature. But it even opens the door to some B2B and B2C businesses, right? If they want to help customers validate or validate for specific subnets, that it opens the door to that too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because in the OpenTabSor original article, actually they point to this security reason mainly,
right?
And which I think it's maybe the motivation behind this. But then we realized that it might have this very, very positive side effect where validators are going to end up specializing. And yeah, as you say, it becomes even much easier for businesses like Mentat Minds or Mentat Minds, where so yeah, basically our goal is to help people delegate their TAO. So very, very simple. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see more. But basically, you just set our proxy, and then our proxy will delegate your TAO for you guys. And now what we'll be able to do with the child hotkey is really select the best validator within each subnet, right? And set them as a child hotkey of our parent hotkey. So it's really, right now what we do is we just select the best performing validators, which is good. But then after this update, we can really go down to the subnet level, and on every subnet, really select the best validators that are doing the best jobs in terms of trust or in terms of really rewards. So yeah, it just
pretty cool.
makes it much more granular.
Yeah, can that be on the user's side too? Can they pick like, oh, I like this validator on this subnet. Can I delegate to that one specifically?
Yeah, actually, that's something we haven't thought about for the product, but it would definitely be doable. So basically, leaving the choice to the user instead of doing it for them. And you can definitely imagine a website where you can just kind of as you vote for subnets weights, right? With the miners union today, you would just basically select your validator, the one you want to set your hotkey to. I think it would be more complex on the background because it leaves many different possibilities. But it's something that could be done definitely. Like in general, so many things are possible right now, like much more than what are being done and offered to users. That yeah, definitely another possibility.
Yeah, and speaking of miners union, let's go over there. Brody, I know you've been keeping tabs on these guys. What are they up to?
Yeah, and they're pretty active in the Discord. I think this is like a generally pretty positive, initiative by the miners union, helping people vote on where the TAO is delegated. Of course, Tuta, I know that you've been following closely as well. Do you have any opinions on this?
Yeah, I think it's what we were not expecting exactly, but we're all waiting for this for DTAO, right? Basically, leaving individuals the choice to vote, to assign weights, for a subnet or another, instead of having only the top validators doing it. And we saw all this debate going started by Bad English T, right? With where he puts all his weights on SN0. Some thought it was good, some others thought it was bad. But like at some point, SN0 had so SN0 is basically the root network, and all the weights that are going to this subnet are the TAO, the emissions. They're getting recycled, so they're not getting distributed to subnets, owners, miners, or validators. And at one point, 25% of all the TAO being created were distributed to recycling, basically subnet zero. So miners union was a big initiative in stopping that, in reducing that. And as soon as they launched and Datura implemented it as well, we saw the weights for subnet zero dropping from 25 to 10%, and it gives the power back to holders, right? So it's definitely a great initiative. There are some downsides as well. I mean, it's not a downside, but it's just that with this solution, you have no opportunity cost to vote for a subnet or another. So like if you vote for the wrong subnets
there's no punishment.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. So it's like, yeah, this is definitely a drawback, but it's miners union is definitely a step forward.
Isn't this just basically what STAO would be, but for a specific validator instead of the entire network?
Yeah, I think that's, I'm not sure, but I think that's what I heard as well. Yeah, it's miners union is basically STAO. So like halfway to DTAO maybe, but it's like the easiest half, I'd say.
Yeah, right. It's a way for holders to nominate or to assign weights, but there's no skin in the game, right? They don't have to buy DTAO tokens. They just have to pick. They're basically mini validators for the most part. They're validating for their stake of TAO, which is nice. I mean, it's better than just the 64 largest validators doing that. So yeah, definitely a step in the right direction.
Say no, go on, Brody.
I was just gonna mention it's interesting to see all of these initiatives come out before a huge upgrade such as DTAO, where on the end of the I guess the race here is DTAO, and a lot of these unique solutions are being built, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen once DTAO is actually launched, because there is so much uncertainty about DTAO, and we'll get into more of that uncertainty like later on in this conversation. But there's all these creative initiatives going on, but it seems like they're all going to be, changed dramatically once DTAO does finally get shipped.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't do them, right? You shouldn't.
Yeah, no, totally. it's just interesting. I think like you're building all of these new tools and all these new products, and because of the looming end of the race, so to speak, which is DTAO, is pretty uncertain at this point. I'm just curious to see, how far we do get just for DTAO to launch, and then we kind of have to come back to the table with a whole bunch of other solutions. But I don't think they're a waste, obviously, of time to create this stuff.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think Mentat Minds is part of these initiatives, right? Like what we did here is laying the foundation, but what we're aiming for is definitely something that's going to be possible only with DTAO. And so yeah, we're looking forward to that. And as you said, 563 is the skin in the game, basically. And I think people underestimate how important that is, and how as soon as you have skin in the game, your decision making just becomes completely different. And this is what we need for Bittensor, and to direct TAO incentives to the best subnets as well.
Absolutely. But yeah, speaking of which, let's go check out this new tool that launched, TAO Yield. Pretty cool. It basically tells you which validators are yielding, what the validators are yielding. So if you go to them, you can see the top yields are from APY standpoint. And for folks that are on the outside looking in, you might wonder why there's such a variation here. Do we want to get into why you often see these variations here? Maybe Tuta, you can help explain.
Yeah, I think first thing is important to note that TAO Yield is made by Owl Ventures, right?
So that's just an important note.
Important note, right? But it's also true that there are definitely the best, if not on the top 3 validators for a while now. Now, why is APY varying so much? I think it's mainly because first, if you decide not to wait copy, the job is much harder. So earning more than 18% without wait copying is very hard. I'd say probably impossible. So all the ones that you're saying, all ventures, Statro, maybe an RE, I have no idea if they really wait copy or not, but it's what most people think. Anyways, we see APY is very variable. Also here they show a 7-day APY, and as I think the guys from Taostats make a hard time of insisting on, is the 7-day. 7 days, not like 30-day, and past performance is not predictive of future results, right? So yeah, everything, only things to keep in mind.
Definitely. But I was interested to see just how varied they are. But cool tool. People want to go check it out. You can.
And I think it's
a good place to start, at least. You're like, okay, these guys, go check out like a little bit more about Datura, a little bit more about Taostats, and learn what they're all about, their strategies, that sort of thing. And from here, you can start looking at, okay, which subnets do they support? Which are they, validating honestly, or do they tend to go way copying route? It's just a good resource to have, I think.
Yeah, and we can make a connection to what we're talking about on child hotkeys. But when you see this and you realize that, for example, even the Optimism Foundation, they're not definitely the top earning validator, you realize how hard it is to validate on every subnet and be successful and be performance. And this is why child hotkeys are so much needed, right? Because it's going to allow big validators to delegate the validation on specific subnets to other validators. So yeah, again, just this variance in APY shows why something like child hotkeys are so much needed.
I think it's important to note too that not every validator is indexing for the highest emissions, right? So the OTF, they're very, I believe, I don't know if morally driven is the correct terminology, but they're very driven in supporting subnets that they believe align with their vision, right? So they're going to optimize for supporting those projects that are basically moving in the direction that they believe is important for the wider ecosystem, as opposed to somebody up somebody else who's higher up on the list is trying to compete to provide the best yield to those delegators, right? So I think that's an important, thing to kind of mention is,
Absolutely.
Foundry, for example, is a project that's, a validator that's, supporting the subnets in which they are incubating themselves, right? So to avoid, deregistration or, some other form of penalty, so to speak. So I think that's important to point out that not everyone is, trying to maximize yield. And I generally think that DTAO is going to kind of shift that, right? Because right now you're relying on a lot of, I guess, goodwill from the validators to, be morally aligned with the greater good of the project. Whereas DTAO will be much more, market driven. There'll be a lot more volatility, and you're kind of displacing a lot of that back into the hands of free market capitalism, which I think is, noteworthy.
Yeah, that's why the meme "DTAO fixes this" is so prevalent. Like,
yep,
because I think it does. Awesome. Wanted to shout out Paladin, who just launched on Subnet 14. Pretty cool project. And I know when I shared it with the community over at Blogmates, they were excited about it. It's basically a proactive fraud detection program and wallet where the validators go out and create and manage fraud detection campaigns, and then the miners on the other side analyze transactions and try to report fraudulent activities, and they're rewarded for reporting those frauds. So pretty cool. What I thought was interesting is they want to link up with a lot of the other subnets. So they'll integrate with Subnet 15 for data acquisition, 13 for data sourcing, 22 for data sourcing. So that I thought that was notable. I haven't seen other subnets wanting to integrate that much. Maybe one or two, maybe one integration per subnet. But what do you know? Do you think that's like a political thing?
Yeah, I think I remember OTF sharing that they would weight subnets that contribute to the overall ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a strategy for them to get weights from OTF. I don't know. I might be totally off, but
doesn't hurt.
I don't know. It rings a bell.
Yeah, I think that there's two ways of looking at subnets, right? There's the services aspect, and then there's the research aspect. As far as I can tell, I believe that validators such as the OTF are optimizing more for supporting those who are pushing towards the research side of AI development, as opposed to the service side. And there's a mixture of reasons for that, but Paladin, for me, off just the rip, looks like someone who's indexing more towards providing a service as opposed to advancing model development or AI in that capacity that's relevant for the OTF. And there's not really a benchmark, a scientific or academic benchmark that Paladin is providing in striving to beat or exceed in any capacity. So I don't know if you guys have any commentary on that, but that's kind of what I've seen come from Discord conversations lately.
Yeah, and I definitely think there's some gray area there, right? You can provide a service while also contributing to academic research. So what they're trying to do with fraud detection, I think, is interesting. I don't know if there's any benchmarking that you could do for that. But right, I don't know if there's machine learning out there that specifically tries to find frauds in smart contracts. So I think it is interesting, and if you can productize it, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing.
No, definitely, it's not bad to have a product. It's not bad to sell it either. But it's true that at this stage, maybe like weighting subnets only because they have a selling product is maybe not the best best route to go right now. But at the end of the day, like in a few years, once Bittensor has matured enough, it's sure that it's where most subnets will be directed to, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this opens up a much more philosophical question or discussion about the direction of BitTensor and what the ecosystem participants are indexing for. I don't necessarily think that there's an issue with subnets trying to create, profitable service. But, other people may disagree with what Bittensor was created for, and may not be as supportive as people or subnet owners that are building incentives to improve foundational models, for example, right? So there's kind of this separation, in the gray area, like you said, 563 is a little confusing on where you kind of draw the line between what's academic or research focused as opposed to service focused. And I don't believe that there's any right or wrong answer. It's just interesting to see all the players in the ecosystem index for a specific side of that spectrum.
Yeah, and I'm super interested to see how the market values services versus research subnets.
Yeah, me too.
Because I don't think it's going to be exactly aligned to what OTF thinks. I think some people that are more crypto native, they might want to see more applications. And then some people that are more AI native want to see more research. I'm just really interested where that line is drawn.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because from an investor perspective, right, a fund perspective, you want to know how value is accruing to TAO or to the DTAO token, or maybe even a dual token on Ethereum or on Solana, right? Because that's how you justify a huge investment. Is where are those discoveries? Where is this commoditized intelligence actually being converted into real world value or economic value? So that depends on obviously the fund's thesis, but it is interesting nonetheless to see what type of actor in the system prefers what.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people, moving on, last episode were wondering like, well, how do you find these new subnets without like trolling the Discord all day? Taostats is a great resource for that. Taostats.io. We'll do all the links down in the description, obviously, for show notes and whatnot. But if you go down to subnets, you can check out the subnets, and it'll have all the subnet registration data here, which is really cool. And you can find out when new subnets are registered. You can just like sort this list. There we go. And Tatsu just re-registered. So there you go. You you got into the nick of time, Tatsu. But yeah, you can go through here and see who's registered. You can go sort by emission, so you can see who's getting the most weight. Just a really cool tool. And then if you want to learn about like how they're distributing the distribution of TAO to their miners, you can check out the miner incentive distribution curve here. Really cool to learn a little bit about the inner workings of all these subnets. Go check out Taostats and just like snoop around. You can go to their GitHubs and whatnot. But yeah, we'll sprinkle in tools from here and there when it makes sense, because I know people that are just getting started in the Bittensor ecosystem, it can be a bit overwhelming and not really sure where to start. I usually point people towards the Discord, just because that's where all the development's going on. But then you see the wall of channels for all the subnets now. It used to be not so bad when there's only 30 of them, but now it's getting close to 50, and I understand that it's a little overwhelming. I mean, that's why we're here. We're here to help. But yeah, let's move on. I think Omega Labs had this cool update. They're working on, well, basically I can just read it here. So they trained their Llama 3 in a multimodal fashion, and they to understand imaging benchmarks. And it's the first multimodal Llama 3 that understands image, audio, and video. So really cool. I haven't seen, I mean, obviously this is the first time it's ever happened. And I think it really shows that where we have like centralized entities like OpenAI and Anthropic that are really doubling down on these LLMs because they know it works and because it's safe, and it's safe to convince investors to keep investing in these things. But there's not a lot of room to experiment, and that's why I really love what Bittensor is building here, because it gives opportunity to these projects that to go out and experiment and try to do something new. But yeah, have you guys been following what Omega's been doing?
Yeah, they also shipped Taopill with Sammy, and we'll get into that later. But the team has been shipping nonetheless.
Absolutely.
And I've heard they haven't raised, right? I saw one of the tweet, I think, fully like they're self-funded or something like that, which is nice.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I wonder if they're TAO funded, just off the emissions. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You can actually go play with the model too. So you're able to go and actually play with it. Pretty cool. You can select a model, you can drag and drop a file in here, and you can start querying it down at the bottom. Really cool tool if you guys want to go check out.
Yeah, there's so many models on the market right now. So interesting. You can't really keep up with all of them, right? I mean, you've got the centralized ones. I was using Perplexity for the first time the other day for research purposes, and then you've got Claude, which is optimized for other things such as code and writing, and then you've got Venice AI, which is another one that we're really big fans of at Onchain Outpost. That's focused on privacy and censorship resistance with outputs. And then you've got a lot of stuff coming out on the Bittensor end too. You've got Targan, the guys at Subnet 4 are building some of these chatbots. You've got TensorPlex that has a lot of native AI tooling, and then you've got Omega now that's built their own. So it's really interesting to see the abundance of options, and all of them, like playing with all of them, you see the differences in outputs and the differences in ways that they're better than others. So there isn't really one model that's good for everything, or the best at everything. So it's really kind of like where they're optimizing and which benchmarks they're trying to compare to. I'm really curious to see the end state of the chatbot LLM product, right? Because you've got Omega, which is building more or less, a multimodal, Llama 3. It's more or less a mixture of experts, right? So we're going to see a lot of interesting, I think, interfaces that are basically orchestration layers, which just ping whichever models are specialized in whichever part of the prompt. My friend at Masari built something personally for himself, and he says that he spends $50 a day on like calls and inferences for Claude, ChatGPT, and I don't remember the other one, but maybe it was Mistral or something. But so the end state of the chatbot is going to be really interesting, I think. And I think there is a future where there is, a couple front ends. And I was talking to you 563 about this, where you're creating more or less a Farcaster-esque user experience where it's all on the same layer of APIs, and then you can kind of pick and choose how your front end is designed. For those of you who don't know Farcaster, it's basically a social layer that allows you to create different front ends to create different user experiences for social products and apps. So I think there's an end state where I can go and create my own personalized front end that hits on all these APIs, and I can kind of shift the weights of the response that I want to get. So multimodality is really cool, and I think that we're going to see a lot more aggregation and orchestration layers mix in a lot of these features.
Absolutely.
That was a bit of a tangent.
No, that's great.
About
That's great.
About these chatbots, I kind of have the feeling that the offer is already higher than the demand, right? And like now, I find myself just moving from ChatGPT to like the Corcel beta to whatever one I can open, and I wonder how it's gonna end up. Like, is it really gonna be valuable to run a chatbot, an LLM chatbot, or is it really gonna be so common that there is not much value there? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I talk to a lot of people too. Just I feel like we, as people who are interested in AI and interested in crypto, we just have this full scope of the tooling that's available for us, and we kind of instinctually know at this point what's good for what reasons. And I go and talk to some of my friends that are not, down the rabbit hole as far as we are, and they don't even use, ChatGPT to help them structure emails, right? Like they're still not even adopting and embracing any of these tools. So I feel like just by even using ChatGPT, you're ahead of like 99% of people. which is crazy to think about. And then you go a step further, and we've got people like us who are using different models for different use cases and playing with all these things. We're literally experimenting with Omega's model like the day it drops, right? Like that counts for something, I think, in regards to how far along we are as AI power users, and also as an extension of us, everyone who's on, watching this stream or watching this podcast back or recording or whatever, like you guys are way ahead of the curve as well. And getting access to all of these things in real time, just like we are. So it's really cool. And I think that that's a whole other philosophical conversation, but those who are adopting AI now and understanding the nuances of all of these different tools are going to be much further along in, 6 months to, 18 months from where we are today.
Yeah.
It's actually funny. We had a discussion with some real life friends, and we were like, they were telling us about this new AI model and whatever. And then on the back of my head, I was thinking about this meme where you have the guy at the back of the party, like, yeah, if she knew what I was doing with Bittensor and what's going up in the Bittensor Discord, they would get crazy. So yeah, definitely agree.
They only knew. Yeah, I mean, we're in the trenches, man. And I think
more or less.
Honestly, if you're not really paying attention to this stuff, it might not seem like a big deal, like the developments in AI, but I think people that are slow to adopt these new tools that are coming up are just going to be left behind. And it's kind of sad to see, but I think it'll pay to get used to these tools earlier rather than later.
I have a whole opinion about the philosophical. Yeah.
I wanted to highlight Sammy's new tool here, Taopill. Great name. Love the name. But
great IP.
Great IP. Props to Sammy for that. But basically, it's just like a really clean interface to understand what's going on with each of the subnets. So it's nicely labeled so we got like AI model development here, data pipeline, compute, generative AI, whatnot. And you can start going through and learn a little bit about each of them. So if you click on one, you see, all right, this is subnet 9, a little bit about them. You can see their white paper. And if you go to one that has like an app, it'll tell you it's an app and you can go play with the app. Really cool way to structure it. And it's probably something that was needed. There are other resources, like I've liked Subnet Alpha is pretty good. It goes a little bit more in depth to each of the subnets. So you can start going into, a little bit more about the emissions and whatnot and what it does. But I thought this was a really clean way to present each of the subnets. Have you guys tried this one out yet?
Yeah, I really like ecosystem maps in general. And I feel like this is an interactive ecosystem map where you can kind of see the different categories and which subnets are hitting on which specific aspects of AI. So yeah, I really like it. Good job, Sammy and Wombo in Nothing Labs. We'll link that down in the show notes as well. But generally, really excited to kind of see more added to this, especially the achievement side. If you scroll down on the right pane,
there you go.
Training. Yeah. So I don't know how those are inputted right now. Sammy's probably doing them maybe manually because there's a lot of nuance with it. But like that's really important. Seeing a time series of all the different achievements.
And about Taostats and these tools, it's making me think about TAOmarketcap.com. So basically the explorer from Datua, which is really, really good as well. And another helpful one.
There you go. Yeah, I'll have to add this to my list. This is, nice. I actually haven't seen this. I don't know how I have not seen this.
Yeah, I think they released it maybe like during the summer. Don't remember when, but it's very nice. Easier to like organize the data, filter things, or
oh, cool.
It's really good.
I really like the mission.
Like if you go to miners, you can see, or validators, I don't remember, you can see how each validator within each subnet weight the miners.
Oh, really?
So like it goes really into details, and these details are easily actionable.
Wow, this is pretty clean.
So yeah, you can see like root weights, of course.
Wow.
yeah, anyway, like go play with this one, and
Yes, I
it's
will.
very very helpful to understand more about. It's basically how I learned how Bittensor worked, right? It's just going through Taostats and like looking at all the tabs, and then you're just discovering everything.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, you can see when they
Like historically
change their root
That's
weights.
cool.
That's really cool. Oh well, glad we brought you on to it. That's awesome. We should make all the guests come with some alpha. I appreciate that. But yeah, go check out those tools. And yeah, let's move on. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about this whole discussion about call options that popped up in the novelty search this last week. For folks that don't know, the novelty search is the weekly community call that goes on in the Bittensor Discord. And there was this, I mean, not offhand comment, but there was this comment made in the chat about how we should be thinking about rewarding subnet owners in the DTAO landscape. Should they still be getting the flat 18% emission? Should there be some kind of dwindling of those rewards over time? And then someone brought up, let's give them call options instead on TAO. And how that would work is there would be some agreed upon strike price of their DTAO token. Say it's like 1% of a TAO, and it would only make sense for them to exercise those options after, say, like 6 months. Maybe that's the expiry date, and they can exercise. It only makes sense for them to do that if their DTAO token was worth more than 1% of a TAO. So it kind of gives them an incentive to gain that share of the market over time. But what do you guys think? Do you think this is a smart thing to do? Do you think it should be considered? Where do you guys land?
At the beginning, I was really excited about this. I felt like, oh yeah, that's the way to go. And then I posed actually the novelty search, and I got back to it the day later, and I heard Will, I think, from Macrocosmos, and he were sharing his point of view from a subnet owner, actually having to manage multiple subnets, and he was saying like these kind of game theoretic payouts are really nice, but then when you factor in the amount of predictability that is needed to build a subnet, so like basically he was talking about paying people at the end of the month, then you realize it's very impractical. And yeah, it's I have to agree. I have to admit that he changed my mind about it. And I think that the simpler the better. And also that's not something that, I mean, that's something that could be tailored maybe after. And yeah, I kind of have this feeling about DTAO in general, like the main mechanism should be working very well and well designed to have DTAO released, but then maybe you have more different parts that could be improved along the way. So I remember Const at one point saying like, but it's getting totally on something else, but that basically the curves for like TAO DTAO tokens could be like anything, but yeah, it's getting much more complicated then. So like maybe these like subnet owner payouts or all these different specificities could be thought about along the way, I guess.
Yeah, simpler the better. I mean, I can go on a tangent on why I think it's cool, but why I think it's maybe detrimental. But I will abide by the general like sentiment towards DTAO with my own, conclusion that the simpler the better.
Yeah, because DTAO in itself is already complicated, right? It's already going to change the dynamics of how Bittensor works. And while this is kind of a cool idea because, stock options make a lot of sense in the business world, maybe it makes a lot of sense in a capitalistic engine like Bittensor. Right. I mean, like I come from like an aerospace background, and anytime you add complexity in a design, it's not just linear in like mean time to failure or any like risk. It's exponential because you're not really sure the dependencies there until you actually go out and fly the thing. And you don't want to fly this machine, this Bittensor machine, with all of these unknowns. So I completely understand that perspective, and I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. If anything, maybe make it up to the subnet owners what the take rate is over time. I could see that happening, and maybe make the max 18%, and then between 9 and 18%, like they've done with the take rate for validator commissions. Maybe that makes sense. But yeah, I agree with you guys. It's probably interesting from an intellectual perspective, but I don't know if it makes sense from a business perspective, especially if we want to keep the bar pretty low for folks that are coming on board. Now they don't have to figure out, like, do call options, ruin their business model.
I think someone mentioned like the fact of having a variable take rate. So it's not necessarily 18%, but something between like 0 and 18% would also make sense. I think it's calling from Omron, from Inference Labs. Yeah, Omron Subnet, that shared that all subnets don't need the same take, right? They're all made for different purposes, and the subnet owners don't need as much resources to build their subnet. So yeah, I think having at least a variable take rate would definitely make sense.
Yeah, it kind of brings up the whole thing with, I mean, on the same side of like validators and miners, like some subnets it's super expensive to validate and super expensive to mine. Maybe it makes more sense to even make those variable, like maybe it costs an incredible amount to mine on a certain subnet. So maybe the miners deserve more of the pool. But I know that's like a future question, but it's something to think about going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting conversation when compared to the call option conversation. I think the call option conversation is just a complete distraction, to be honest. But the emissions allocation conversation is much more interesting to me, simply because I believe that subnets are obviously running a business, right? That's not a hot take at all. And as a business, you want to reduce your cost as much as possible. So as a result, that drives down organically over time. It drives down the take rate of the subnet owner to produce that commodity as cheap as possible, right? So I'm kind of curious to see, variability in the different rates, in the customizability there, because like you said, everyone kind of in that ecosystem of validator, subnet miner, and subnet owner will all have varying production costs associated with it. So, where on the spectrum or within the triangle should the emissions lie? It should be dependent upon the subnet owner. If they're in charge of, creating the incentive mechanism, then I believe it's within everyone's best interest to also have a variable emissions allocation according to Subnet too.
Totally agree. Yeah,
I don't know. Do you agree with that?
I think I do. I do agree.
Do all emissions trend towards zero for the subnet owner, or am I thinking about that backwards?
Well, I don't think they trend towards zero. I think they deserve to get a constant flow of the emissions because, they're running a business and they need incentive to keep running that business. If they're not getting any emissions, what is their incentive to keep running that business, honestly?
Yeah, but it just gets super competitive when everybody else is trying to do generally the same thing, right? Because
do we want it to be that competitive?
I don't know. That's a whole other conversation. But
no, I think I kind of agree with you, Brody, in the sense that as the subnet matures, like the improvements are incremental and goes and gets smaller and smaller, and so it would make sense in that case that the subnet owners get smaller and smaller share of the revenue, of the incentives of the subnet, and that more revenues get to miners that produce the commodity and validators that may give access to it, right? But in any case, having these variables variable in every subnet would be a very interesting dynamic to watch. But again, as we were saying earlier, probably something to come after TAO, like another stone to add to the castle.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, really appreciate you guys hopping on today. Yeah, Tuta, anything you want to plug? I really appreciate you coming on today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think no, all good, very interesting. If you don't know how or where to stake your TAO, come visit Mentat Minds. We have a channel in the TAO community Discord, and of course we can answer to all of your questions.
Awesome, man.
Cool.
Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the TAO Times newsletter if you want an even deeper dive into this week's updates. And if you want to join the conversation, come ape into the Blockmates Discord, and we will see you all next week. Thanks, fellas.
Sweet. Thanks for joining, Tuta. It was great to have you on.
Bye, guys. Thank you very much.